Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, of course, David Cameron's been keen to contribute to the European Space Agency to make Tim Peake's mission happen. But elsewhere, his relationship with Europe is rather more fractious. He's off there this week with a pocket full of demands, but the European Commission chief has warned that leaders are still far from agreement over Britain's renegotiation. The pressure for a deal will be increased by a new poll today, suggesting a majority of people are now in favour of Britain leaving the EU. But Europe's leaders have got other problems to deal with, not least the immigration crisis. Here's our political editor, Gary Gibbon.
The EU says that this year 1.5 million people have made irregular crossings into the European Union. To deal with that, the European Commission announced a plan for more Europe. The joint EU Frontier Defence Force will be beefed up and deployed to any country thought to be failing to defend the EU's borders, whether that country likes it or not.
Could we impose this on a member state even against the will of that member state? I see this as a safety net.
That'll be one of the many tough discussions at the EU summit on Thursday before leaders even get round to discussing David Cameron's renegotiation. Those campaigning to leave the EU claim the migrant crisis has been helping their cause make headway. Looking at the average of the opinion polls since the autumn started, it looks as though the campaign to remain inside the EU has seen its lead dwindle. Although some think that's a function of which polling companies have been doing the polling and which methods they use. They're now nothing like as far ahead as the Yes campaign in Scotland, this far ahead of Scotland's referendum. These figures don't include don't knows. They're something like 17% on average of the sample. And they're not necessarily don't votes. They could make the difference, those of them that choose to vote. Likewise, if Scotland's anything to go by, there could be real switches between the two camps come polling day itself.
Don't read too much into it, but there is a direction of travel. And it's not just happening in Britain, it's happening across the rest of Europe too. Increasingly, people are losing faith in these institutions.
You don't dispute that your side has lost its lead, its rather substantial lead.
Absolutely, and I would always say, you know, some of the good songs are on the outside, and we do need to ensure that we are not complacent, that we get out in the country.
A full-on EU treaty signing. David Cameron knows his renegotiation won't be sealed with one of these, and a cross-party committee of MPs says that really matters. They say if the changes are agreed to as planned, by a shortcut agreement between heads of government rather than the usual multi-year protracted treaty renegotiation, then by definition it's not substantial or watertight.
You cannot make the changes which are irreversible and binding without treaty change. That's the conclusion we've come to. We took evidence from legal experts, from ministers and the rest, and that's the conclusion we've arrived at.
It all comes down to a matter of trust. These are friendly democracies with whom we deal on a day-to-day basis. Just as we wouldn't agree something with them and go back on it, so nor will they. And I do think it takes the kind of weird, suspicious mind that basically doesn't trust anyone with a foreign accent to think that that kind of international agreement wouldn't actually have effect in the long run.
Tonight, the European Council President Donald Tusk has written in stark terms to all of Europe's leaders, warning them they're still far from agreement in the high-stakes debate they face in 2 days' time. There must, he said, be no taboos.
Gary Gibbon reporting there.
I've been getting away.